The galaxy had watched Earth for centuries with a mixture of nervous curiosity and dismissive confidence. Humanity was young, unpredictable, reckless enough to hurl themselves into the void with metal tubes and hope, yet clever enough to survive every cosmic test thrown their way. But even then, the Galactic Council never believed Earth would matter. They labeled humanity a developing anomaly, tolerated their rise, and quietly agreed that if Earth ever became a threat, they would put it down before it grew teeth. They were wrong, because the day humanity awakened from its silence, the day they stepped fully onto the galactic stage, was the day the old order fractured like glass under pressure. It began with a transmission, short, precise, cold. A simple message from Earth to the Council that carried no anger, no panic, no plea. Just a statement. We know what you've done. Across the core worlds, ambassadors exchanged uneasy glances. No one knew how much humanity had discovered, how deep they had dug, or how far their intelligence webs reached. But the calm certainty of Earth's voice sent a shiver down species with nerves woven through bone or suspended in liquid gas, because the Council had done something. For years they had manipulated border skirmishes, redirected pirate factions, and sabotaged Terran colonies to keep humanity destabilized, weak enough to obey, strong enough to be useful. And Earth, they believed, had been blissfully unaware, but now, humanity's silence was broken, and it was not the silence of prey. The Council convened in a grand chamber carved from a moon-sized crystal, its walls shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with emotion. Representatives from 23 dominant species gathered, each radiating an unease that tasted of iron, ammonia, or electric dust. They debated for hours, but every voice carried the same thorn of fear. How much did the humans know? How much were they willing to tolerate? When Earth's delegation arrived, that fear bloomed into terror. The doors opened with a low rumble. And 3 humans stepped into the chamber, not military officers, not diplomats trained to bend the knee, but a scientist, historian, and a quiet young woman with eyes as sharp as stars. None wore expressions of anger. That unsettled the Council more than fury ever could. The humans simply stood at the center of the circular hall, surrounded by species that could strip their flesh with sound or freeze their blood with a thought, and they looked composed, entirely unafraid. As if they had walked not into a lion's den, but into a meeting they had already won. The historian spoke first. His voice was soft, measured, reverberating through the crystalline hall like a gentle echo. He told the Council their secret was out: the engineered border conflicts, the destabilization efforts, the intercepted orders, the covert operations disguised as natural events. He laid out every detail with surgical precision, each revelation driving deeper into the Council's already splintering unity. And then he did something no species had ever dared in that chamber. He went silent. The silence stretched. It grew. It became a presence. A weight. A warning. Humanity had the galaxy's attention now, but the humans weren't finished. The young woman stepped forward, and her voice carried a gravity far older than her years. She told them Earth had never wanted war, never sought dominance, never desired to rule. But they would never accept manipulation. Never allow another species, no matter how ancient, to decide their fate. They would not bend. They would not break. They would not kneel. When she finished speaking, she simply looked at the Council with calm certainty. That calm broke the galaxy long before the war did, because in that moment, they understood, humanity was no longer a developing anomaly. Humanity was a force, and Earth's silence had ended. The Council had expected threats, ultimatums, emotional outbursts, anything they could dismiss as typical human impulsiveness. But instead, the human stillness became the most terrifying thing in the chamber. It was not the silence of hesitation. It was the silence of beings who had already prepared for every outcome, including the darkest one. The Varaxian Chancellor, a towering creature of obsidian plates and molten veins, surged to his feet. His species prided itself on aggression, dominance, the ability to intimidate entire armies with a single bellow. He roared at the humans, demanding proof, demanding justification, demanding fear. The humans didn't flinch. the roar reverberated off the crystalline walls, shaking light loose from the ceiling like falling stars. Delegates recoiled in alarm, some covering sensory organs, others cowering behind their bodyguards. Only the three humans remained motionless, watching the Chancellor as though he were nothing more than a storm passing overhead, and that, more than any evidence, was proof. The Chancellor faltered, the molten glow under his armor dimming with a tremor the galaxy had never seen in his kind. Fear. Genuine fear. Not of humanity's size or strength, but of humanity's resolve. Earth's scientist stepped forward next. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle, but every syllable cut deep. She detailed the sabotage on outposts, the engineered famines, the false flag attacks designed to turn humanity against its neighbors. She projected intercepted council memos into the air, damning proof painted in cold, factual light. The chamber erupted. Some species denied it. Others panicked. A few stayed silent, eyes burning with guilt, but before the chaos could spiral, the young woman raised her hand, and the entire room stopped arguing, not from fear, from recognition, because the humans' data wasn't the real threat. The threat was that humanity had held on to it, quietly, patiently, without lashing out, for years. They had discovered the truth and said nothing. They had observed, calculated, prepared. Not once had they retaliated prematurely. It was the patience of a predator who didn't strike until it had secured the kill. The council finally understood, if humans had come to confront them now, they had likely already prepared for war. The council speaker, a being made of floating rings of plasma and stone, flickered with distress. "What do you want, humans of Earth?" The young woman answered without emotion, "Autonomy. Transparency. And a council that no longer operates in the shadows." Her tone was not a request, it was a verdict. A few species nodded, some in agreement, others simply to hide trembling limbs. The speaker tried desperately to negotiate, to soothe, to regain control of the narrative. But political maneuvering meant nothing now. Not when humanity stood in that chamber like a storm that had finally taken shape. Then a low rumble filled the air, not from the chamber, from space. The crystalline walls shimmered as external shields activated. Alerts rippled through the delegates' neural links. Fleet signatures appeared at the edge of the system, thousands of them, human. The Midnight Armada had arrived, a fleet humanity had sworn they would never use unless forced, a fleet rumored to be built in silence, funded by a united Earth for a threat no one believed existed, a fleet no one, not even the Council, had known the full size of. The galaxy froze as the magnitude of the arriving force registered across the Council's sensors. It was not an act of war. Not yet. It was a message. Earth was done whispering, and the galaxy had run out of time. The council chamber felt suddenly smaller, as though the walls themselves were afraid to breathe. Every delegate's eyes shifted to the holographic display flickering above them, thousands of human ships emerging from folded space like a midnight storm taking physical shape. The vessels were angular, silent, obsidian-edged silhouettes rimmed with blue atmospheric glow, each one a testament to engineering born not from conquest, but from survival. The humans didn't turn to look at the display. They didn't need to. They had known exactly when their fleet would arrive. What terrified the galaxy even more was that the Midnight Armada held position. They didn't aim weapons. They didn't broadcast threats. They simply existed, and that existence alone made even apex predator species feel like prey. Whispers shivered through the chamber. They weren't supposed to have battleships that size. Who unified them? How did they build that without council detection? That many dreadnought signatures, they'd need 10 planets worth of resources. Some delegates began to tremble, others began planning escape routes. A few, those who had engineered Earth's suffering, could no longer meet the humans' eyes. The youngest human stepped forward now. A soldier. Not armored. Not armed. Wearing only the simple navy uniform of Earth's Peace Division. His presence radiated quiet authority, the kind that made even telepathic species sense the immovable spine beneath his calm expression. He spoke with the humility of a man who had seen too much war and wanted none of it. He described the council-sanctioned raids on border colonies, the covert operations designed to provoke humanity into lashing out, the calculated cruelty that had attempted to portray Earth as unstable, volatile, unfit for membership. He detailed the mission where he had nearly died dragging alien civilians out of a collapsing habitat, an event the council had twisted into propaganda accusing humans of sabotage. With every word, the chamber grew colder. He wasn't just speaking, he was indicting them. The speaker of the council flickered, fractured by guilt and fear. Human soldier. What is your demand? A simple question. His answer was not simple. He told them the truth humanity had kept hidden longer than any species should have been capable of, that while the council manipulated, coerced, and framed them, Earth had chosen restraint, that they had dismantled assassins instead of killing them, that they had diverted fleets rather than retaliating, that they had swallowed humiliation to avoid galaxy-wide war. And that the restraint was over. A pulse of dread swept the chamber like shockwaves off a collapsing star. The soldier lifted his gaze, dark and steady. Earth will not kneel. Not now. Not ever again. A murmur broke out through the chamber, half outrage, half awe. But before the speaker could even rise, the room shook, not from weapons firing, not from the human fleet, from the sudden arrival of another fleet, a smaller one, faster, radiating fear and desperation. Its transponder codes flashed across the chamber's airspace. The Vasari Protectorate, a species known for neutrality. Their ships limped toward the council capital, hulls torn open, reactors flickering. One crashed into the planet's outer shield, one burned out and went dark. One managed a transmission before its core failed. The hologram blinked to life. A Vasari commander appeared, bloodied, frantic, barely conscious. Her voice shook as she screamed across the council chamber. Help us. The harvesters have come. They're devouring everything, cities, oceans, suns, please, anyone. Her image warped violently as her ship systems failed. The hologram cut, silence shattered into raw terror. Delegates cried out. Some collapsed. Others shouted for evacuation orders, because now it made sense, why humanity had waited, why humanity had built a silent armada, why they had prepared for a war no one else believed was coming. The harvesters weren't a myth. They were real. They were coming, and the only fleet large enough, fast enough, ruthless enough to stand against them, that was already here. The Midnight Armada hovered above the capital, engines burning like a second constellation. Humanity had not brought a threat, they had brought the last hope the galaxy had left. The ruins of the orbital ring drifted behind them like a broken halo, its shards glittering in the light of a silent sun. The fleet moved forward with steady determination, engines burning blue, leaving the shattered remains of the Vanguard drones in their wake. Yet the deeper they traveled into council-controlled space, the more the silence felt wrong, too still, too expectant, like the universe was holding its breath. The crew aboard the Dawn Spear felt it too. Even the hum of the ship seemed subdued, as if the metal sensed a storm forming around unknown stars. Humanity had crossed a line the galaxy never expected them to cross. And the consequences were quietly rearranging themselves in the background. Each hour brought them closer to the heart of a civilization that believed humanity should have remained kneeling. As the fleet passed the shimmering nebula wall of Asterian's gate, scanners trembled for the first time. There were signatures ahead. Not weapons. Not ships. Something stranger, ripples, like distant thunder, but in the fabric of space itself. The galaxy's oldest powers rarely entered war. Unless provoked. Humanity had provoked them without hesitation. And now, something vast was waking. The nebula peeled away, revealing colossal structures orbiting a dim blue star, council fortresses. Each the size of continents, each bristling with technology older than Earth's earliest civilizations. They weren't built for war. They were built for judgment. And they were aimed at humanity's fleet. The Dawn Spear slowed, but only for a breath. Humanity didn't freeze in fear anymore. They pressed forward with quiet fury, ready to carve their own fate. The comm station flickered with intercepted transmissions, dozens, hundreds of species nervously whispering across channels. They weren't talking about the Council. They were talking about Earth. About the humans who burned through fleets like falling stars. About a species that responded to oppression with unyielding fire. For the first time in galactic history, aliens feared the underdogs. The flagship emerged at the center of the fortresses, an ancient obelisk of light and armor. Its mere presence distorted gravity, bending space like ripples around a giant. This was the Council's core, not a throne, but a verdict machine. Entire civilizations had been erased by decisions made within its walls. The fleet halted. Not because they were afraid, but because the Council demanded it with a pulse of gravitational authority. Human ships groaned under the pressure but held firm. They didn't bow. They didn't break. A beam of pure white light scanned the Dawn sphere from bow to stern, evaluating not metal but intention. The crew felt it pass through them, analyzing their resolve. The scan turned cold. Disapproving. Ancient power judging a young species that dared to bare its teeth. The Council's voice didn't come as sound but as a resonance felt in the bones. A warning. A demand for surrender. A decree of guilt for crimes humanity never committed, but the message didn't shake the Dawn sphere. If anything, it strengthened the fire behind every human heartbeat. Humanity had seen the Council's justice, distant, selective, cruel. They had watched worlds burn while the Council debated protocols. They had begged for help once, long ago, and their cries went unanswered. They remembered. Captain Rhea stood before her panoramic viewport, watching the fortress worlds align their beams of judgment. She inhaled slowly, calm and unshaken. Her voice, when she spoke to her crew, was a quiet storm. The Council was ancient, but humanity was inevitable. The starfield flashed as the first beams charged, gathering light from the void itself. The ship shook. The fleet braced for annihilation. And yet, in that moment of cosmic stillness before impact, humanity did something the Council had never accounted for. They pushed forward. The engines roared alive, not retreating but accelerating straight toward the heart of the Council's power. Shields brightened. Hulls ignited with the glow of overcharged reactors. The beams of judgment lanced out like the fury of dying gods. And humanity met them head-on, incandescent and unyielding. The galaxy watched as the impossible unfolded. For the first time in thousands of years, the unstoppable judgment of the Council stopped. Human ships tore through the beams like comets refusing to die, streaking toward the obelisk at the center. Every ship burned, every reactor strained, but none faltered. The Council had wanted surrender. Humanity delivered defiance instead, the kind that carved itself into history with fire. Far behind them, in shadowed sectors of space where oppressed species whispered prayers to silent stars, hope began to stir. Not because humanity was strong, but because humanity refused to kneel. The fleet surged forward, firelight blooming across the void as they prepared to do the impossible, strike at the very core of the galactic order itself. The fortress worlds began to rotate, charging a second round of impossible power. But this time, they were too slow. Humanity was already inside the storm. The Council's core loomed before them like a colossal cathedral carved out of starlight and obsidian, its surfaces shifting with runes older than recorded time. As the Dawn spear pierced the boundary of the inner defense sphere, the universe seemed to exhale, as if shocked that humans had made it this far. Gravity swirled in unstable spirals. Space folded in unnatural angles. The ship's hull groaned with the protest of physics itself, but still they advanced. The interior of the Council's domain was nothing like the cold, mechanical fortresses outside. It was alive. Energy currents flowed like rivers suspended in the void, each one carrying centuries of memories, voices of civilizations judged, condemned, erased. The crew felt the weight of them pressing against the walls of their minds. For a moment, their vision blurred with glimpses of alien skies vanishing under Council verdicts, oceans boiling, continents turned to ash. Humanity had not come here for glory. They had come because enough was enough. The fleet followed in tight formation, threading through labyrinths of energy that crackled like storms trapped in glass. Every second felt stolen. Every meter forward felt like trespassing on sacred ground. But in the silence, a pulse began, not the Council's authority, but a heartbeat. A rhythm. Human determination echoing across the calm channels, linking every ship, every soul, into a single unbreakable will. Then the core itself awakened, light cascaded across its titanic surface, forming a colossal projection above the fleet. The shape was amorphous, a swirling mass of fractal limbs and crystalline eyes, shifting between forms too many for a single mind to hold. The Council had never revealed its true nature before. It had never needed to. Power didn't explain itself to the weak, but humanity was not weak anymore. A voice rolled through the chamber like shifting metal plates, overlapping in thousands of tones. A decree. A denial of humanity's right to exist in the higher order. An accusation that their defiance threatened the balance of the galaxy. The Dawn Spear's lights flickered as the projection's presence pressed against their consciousness, yet instead of fear, clarity rose. They understood now. The Council didn't maintain balance. It feared chaos. It feared change. It feared species that refused to fit within predetermined boundaries. It feared humanity because humans shattered every rule simply by surviving. The projection extended a limb of pure prism light, and the space around the fleet bent inward. Metal warped. Time stuttered. Ships twisted like reflections in water. The Council wasn't attacking, it was rewriting reality itself. Humanity answered with fire, energy lances erupted from the fleet in blinding arcs, carving glowing scars across the projection's form. The Council recoiled, the chamber shaking with a distortion that cracked through dimensions. The humans pushed forward, engines screaming, weapon cores igniting like new suns. The Council's control faltered for the first time in eons. The Dawn Spear shot ahead, leading the spearhead of the assault. Energy storms clashed with the ship's shields, bursting into auroras that washed across the hull like ethereal waves. Rhea braced as the projection hurled another crushing wave of altered physics, gravity flipping, inertia doubling, space twisting into spirals. The fleet tightened formation and plunged straight through it. The projection shattered into fragments of light, though each fragment still writhed with power. The core's walls began to blaze with white-hot radiance as the Council awakened its final defense, a collapsing singularity forming at the center of the chamber, a gravitational tear designed to crush the intruders into nothingness. But humanity was already moving. With engines flaring beyond safe limits, they surged toward the singularity. Not to escape it, to reach the heart of the core. They would strike at the very source of the Council's dominion, even if it meant tearing themselves apart. The chamber howled. Ships buckled. Armor plates ripped from hulls and vaporized in the swirling gravity. But human ships locked in formation, shields overlapping, each vessel supporting the next. They advanced as one unstoppable organism of defiance, forging a corridor through the collapsing space. The Dawn Spear broke through first, diving toward the pulsing central pillar, a crystalline monolith humming with the power to command entire galaxies. Rhea triggered the final charge. Their last weapon. Their last gamble, a burst of blue-white fusion light erupted from the Dawn Spear's core. Spiraling toward the monolith in a storm of incandescent wrath. The blast struck. The monolith cracked. Light spilled out like a wounded star bleeding power. The Council screamed in a voice that shook the chamber into fractal shards. The singularity destabilized, growing unstable, oscillating between collapse and explosion. The core was failing. The ancient order of the galaxy was fracturing before humanity's eyes, yet even as everything tore apart in violent light, one truth cut through the chaos: humanity had reached the heart, and they weren't finished yet. The core ruptured in a storm of impossible light, a supernova trapped inside a collapsing dimension, its radiance tearing open fissures that exposed the raw skeleton of reality. The Dawn Spear spun through the debris, its hull blistering, its engines flickering like dying embers. But still it flew. Still it pushed forward. Still it aimed for the final breach, forming where the Council's monolith had split open like a wounded star. Through the fracture, the truth of the Council was revealed, a universe behind a universe, a pocket realm the size of a solar system, forged entirely of thought and command. Rivers of authority flowed like molten silver across floating structures shaped by pure will, pulsing with every decree ever issued. Here was where destinies were drafted, where verdicts overwritten the laws of worlds, where the Council had judged species like figures on a distant board. The moment humanity crossed the threshold, the realm reacted, not with walls, not with weapons, but with memory. Human minds were flooded with visions not meant for mortal comprehension. A glimpse of the Council's origin, a civilization so ancient it had forgotten its own flesh, choosing instead to become architects of order. A species that had once feared chaos so deeply that it built an entire dimension to escape it. A species that learned to command galaxies like pieces of programmable machinery, and worst of all, a species that no longer understood the difference between preservation and tyranny. The realm surged, twisting itself into a blinding storm as it recognized humanity as an anomaly it could not contain. Structures warped into spirals. Rivers of memory surged upward like serpents of energy. The sky cracked open with thunder made of broken timelines. The Council's voice roared through the realm like a collapsing star, not in words but in force, a command for humanity to kneel, to surrender, to be rewritten. Humanity answered by accelerating. The fleet burst into the realm behind the Dawn Spear, shields glowing gold from the distortion storms. They moved like predators through a world built to suppress them. Every ship vibrated with the strain of existence itself, but formation held. Warriors held. Humans held. The Council materialized again, but this time its form was monstrous, a constellation of limbs, eyes, and fractal geometry that shifted with every perception. It loomed above the realm like a deity of pure law. It towered over humanity with the quiet arrogance of something that had never been challenged at its door. It reached down with a limb of prismatic energy, thick enough to crush a planet. Humanity charged directly into it. Lasers burned through spectral flesh. Missiles exploded against crystalline armor. Kinetic rounds rippled across dimensional surfaces like skipping stones across water. The Council staggered, its form splitting into dozens of overlapping shapes, each one screaming in 1,000 different tones, but the tide turned when the humans lit their final weapon. The Earthborn Lance, stored within the Dawn Spear's core, forged from captured Council fragments, tuned by the brightest minds of a species that refused extinction. A weapon built not to destroy, but to sever control. Rhea aimed into the heart of the luminous storm. The lance fired, a beam of pure defiance, white-blue and sharp as truth, tore through the Council's shifting mass. The realm buckled. The rivers of memory evaporated. Structures collapsed into cascading shards of forgotten authority. The Council's voice fractured into silence, and then the realm itself began to die. Space crumbled inwards. Stars of command flickered out. The foundations of ancient order dissolved like dust scattered in cosmic wind. Yet through the collapse, the Dawn Spear surged upward, carrying with it the flame of every human who had refused to bow. The fleet followed, battered but unbroken, escaping as the Council's dimension folded into a single point of glowing ruin. They burst back into real space in a shockwave of collapsing starlight. Behind them, the Council's core imploded. Before them, the galaxy stretched wide and trembling. Waiting for whatever came next, humanity had struck at the heart of an empire. Older than time, and lived, in the silence that followed, as systems rebooted and broken hulls cooled, Rhea whispered the truth the Council could never erase: the age of kneeling was over. And across the galaxy, the age of rising had begun.